Well, hello everyone, and welcome in to the Payne and Drain Show. I'm your host, Zach Payne. With me is my co-host, Alex Drain. In a week where the Lions had their most dominant win in over a decade, and it doesn't really feel like it because of some other things that happened in this game. Alex, how are we feeling a few days after a vengeful victory over the Cowboys?
Uh, that was a tough one because if the thing, shall we say, did not happen, that was gonna be on the short list for best Lions regular season wins of all time, at least in my lifetime. I mean, that I can recall. There were some great ones over the years, but just as dominant and as complete of a game that they have played in a long time. Like we can talk about other great Lions regular season wins, but the Stafford era, you didn't have as many of these kinds of games. Like I guess there was that Thanksgiving blowout of the Packers in 2013, I believe, against I don't remember who was playing quarterback for Green Bay. So that's like your comparable from the old days. This was a dominant showing. It was a great game. Would have been right up at the top among the best, but unfortunately other things intervened, but we shouldn't necessarily throw out the baby with the bathwater. And there were a lot of good things that are not necessarily connected to the big injury that are meaningful, and we'll get into those.
Yeah, and before we head into everything, I just want to preface because I know my audio is a little bit worse right now. Don't have the camera going. I am on a trip for Canadian Thanksgiving because us Canadians do things a little bit weirder, and we have Thanksgiving at the start of October. So apologies for that.
Where are you at?
I'm in Fairmont, British Columbia right now. Out It's a little bit past the Rocky Mountains, and we're kind of settled into a villa. It's like a timeshare spot, little vacation destination that my girlfriend's family, they always come out here every year. So we're out here for the week, but by Sunday I'll be back home and actually able to fully watch the game. So I did miss some of the game. Alex is gonna have to fill in some of those gaps, but yeah, not much to fill in, I guess, aside from the domination. But heading into it, this is it is the most complete effort that they've had this season, probably the most complete effort they have had in the Dan Campbell era. Starting with the offense, they put up 47 points. Did not punt. The Lions did a troll job online. They posted Jack Fox's highlights from the week of him holding field goals for Jake Bates. Everything was working. Everything was working, and it starts on the ground with the offensive line. Micah Parsons was out of this game, and Demarcus Lawrence was out of this game, and Marshawn Kneeland was out. Like the Cowboys were beat up front, and so the Lions they made a point to establish dominance on the ground early with David Montgomery, who has he got paid over the weekend last weekend, and he has quietly become one of the most important cogs in the machine. Like it was just insane to go back and watch how dominant this guy has been over the, like I know his stats are actually a little bit worse than Gibbs in terms of yards per touch, yards per attempt, all that, but David Montgomery has just been fantastic this season.
He's been really, really good. I think, honestly, outside of maybe Derrick Henry, there aren't many running backs in the NFL that are playing better. He's been as good as it gets. Had another, not quite beast quake sort of thing, but a really nice touchdown run to get it going. That first touchdown run, the guy like grabs his like the
The
undershirt,
shirt, I think, yeah.
yeah, the shirt under the jersey, and kind of like pulls it, and then he spins out of it and runs even further into the end zone. As a general rule, the Cowboys tackling in this game was dreadful. It was exploited by both Gibbs and Montgomery. Really sloppy. They weren't wrapping the arms around. They were just coming in trying to hit him. And these guys were bouncing off the hits. And they were staying on their feet, showed good balance, vision, acceleration. Both guys were terrific in this game. And they got great help from the offensive line. The holes were really big. And then when you add on the extra yardage those guys create, you get a dominant game on the ground. And that's what this was.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the Lions had 184 rushing yards. That's incredible. Anytime you're approaching the 200-yard mark on the ground, you are having a dominant day. David Montgomery averaged 6.7 a carry, Gibbs over 5 a carry again, and he's averaging 5.2 on the season. It's weird because Gibbs is known as the more explosive runner. a lot twitchier. He can make people miss in space a lot more, whereas Montgomery's more of a bruising back. And yet it seems that over the past 2 years, David Montgomery is the one who keeps getting the longer runs. I know, like he had the 75-yard run last year against the Chargers. He had a 42-yard touchdown run against the Panthers last year. And even in this game, like Gibbs's longest run was, I think, like 15 yards, and Montgomery had multiple runs of 15 or more. It's very odd how Montgomery ends up being the one who has these breakaways.
Yeah, you wouldn't think so necessarily, but as we've talked about kind of in the past, both these guys are better at the thing the other guy is known for than we like to believe, right? That Gibbs is better in short yardage and shouldering contact than we like to believe, and Montgomery's better in accelerating, getting to the open field than people give him credit for. So they're both really versatile players, and they showed that in this game. They were the lifeblood, but you do have to give a lot of credit to the offensive line because they were dominant
Absolutely.
and just paving the Cowboys, and that showed up, in the pass protection as well. There were a couple sacks, mostly on blitzes more than anything else, but in terms of general pass protection, they were really clean in that phase. It wasn't fair. This Cowboys defense, we talked about it coming in. They had some injuries. They've been generally disorganized. I mean, they got run out of the building by the Saints early in the season, and that happened again here today. I don't know what's going on with that unit, but boy, did they need help because it was a really poor showing again.
Yeah, and I just want to shout out. There was one clip that's been going around on Twitter of Penei Sewell in pass protection. The Cowboys, I don't know if they blitzed 5 or 6 on the play, but they basically had their wide end rushing at Sewell, and then they had, I think it was a safety or a linebacker coming on a delayed blitz right through that B gap, and Sewell gets super wide to match the defensive end. He basically chips him and then covers 3 yards horizontally to get the other guy before he gets to Goff to allow him to complete a pass to Jameson Williams over the middle. And it's that, like, that kind of athleticism at tackle is just so rare. And I know we talk about it a lot as Lions fans. We like to talk about how great Penei Sewell is, but that play in particular has just been going around. I thought it was important to note just how impressive Sewell has been this season, even though he almost, weirdly enough, almost got a touchdown in this game, which we could talk about more in the game theory section. But he's just incredible of an athlete, and I know Ragnow was had a few pancake blocks in this game as well. Taylor Decker almost mossed someone in the end. So this is just a hilarious game in terms of, like, Ben Johnson was doing the ultimate troll job, the offensive line, the ultimate athletes for the Lions, and it's incredible to watch.
Yeah, I saw some people online referring to the offensive line as the Detroit People Mover, which is a great nickname. Most of the people listening to this podcast are probably familiar with the rather dinky public transit thing called the Detroit People Mover in downtown Detroit that runs on a little circuit around downtown. It's not the world's most impressive use of public transit, but it's I like that nickname for the offensive line. I don't know if it'll get picked up, but I got a kick out of that. But certainly in this game, the name was pretty apt.
Yeah, that, and then we have Sonic and Knuckles in the backfield. The nicknames are coming out in full force this season. Now, as it pertains to the weapons on offense, Sam Laporta, we've talked about, hasn't necessarily been a focal point of the offense this season. It's maybe he's had a bit of a quiet game, quiet season so far. Only has one catch in this game, but it was a doozy of a trick play. The Lions break out the double reversed flea flicker thing, and it works out for a 52-yard touchdown to Laporta. That was the second touchdown of the game. And that really set the tone for the trick plays in this game. The Lions talked about unloading the clip and not being worried about showing some of these things on tape because you always have to innovate and find new things. But Laporta gets a 52-yarder. Montgomery gets another touchdown. Jameson Williams gets a big touchdown torching Trayvon Diggs. And Amon-Ra St. Brown got a touchdown towards the end of the game. This might be the only time this season, or like in any game, that we're going to see every single key weapon, get in the end zone. I guess Gibbs didn't, or like be a huge contributing factor.
Yeah, this was a really varied performance. No one was particularly dominant in this game, but when you have so many different options, it allows you to do so much stuff. And You don't have to feature one guy. You can look at this season and say, oh, Amon-Ra isn't as good as he was last year. Laporta wasn't as good as he was last year. Well, it's like part of it is the fact that JMO's a much bigger force, and you're having success with the running backs. And like when you have that many weapons, you don't need to feed a guy a million balls to get him to 1,500 yards. Like it's fine if a guy's only at 1,000 because you're featuring other weapons. And I thought JMO in this game had a really nice performance. He has the one drop, and as many people noted at the time, they go right back to him on the very next play. He catches it. That's big for his confidence, but they had another crosser they used to pick up a chunk. I mean, and then you throw the touchdown. So that game was kind of an example of everything they want to do with him and all of his routes kind of on display. It's a pretty predictable route tree, but it's predictable because no one can stop it at the moment. You're getting basically one deep ball a game, one or two deep crosses a game, and it's boom, put 70 yards in the bank, probably a touchdown. And if you're doing that each week, you're in real good shape. And that's the kind of year that he's having to this point. And even Amon-Ra gets the touchdown in the end zone. He carves up, I think it was Jordan Lewis for that touchdown. I know he was having the beef with Jordan Lewis after the game. Very unfortunate for Michigan fans who were a fan of Jordan Lewis in college because he came out kind of looking like a, I don't know, not favorable in that trash talking war, given what was going on the field, and he's still chirping after the game. But good day all around for the receivers.
Yeah, and Jameson Williams, I do want to highlight on the touchdown. This is, we talk about evolution every week, and for Jameson Williams, the way he beat Trayvon Diggs, very good corner, was leading the league in interceptions the other couple seasons ago. He's still like is he one of the best coverage corners in the league? No, but he's a good ball hawk, and he is a Pro Bowl caliber corner. And Jameson Williams, we know, hasn't always done the best against press so far in his career. And he beat Trayvon Diggs off the line. Like by the time he got 5 yards into his route, he had 2 yards of separation because his first step is so quick, and he did a great job of fighting through contact at the line. And it's really impressive, and that's exactly what you want to see from him. As you hope that he can kind of develop into maybe not necessarily an X receiver, but someone who can play on the line of scrimmage a lot more. And so far, the Lions put this tweet out on Williams' stats so far. He's so far tied for first in the league with the most 50-plus yard receptions. He has three of those. He is second in average in receiving average, averaging 22.8 yards per catch. He is second in games with 75-plus receiving yards, having four of those games so far, and he is second in 25-plus yard touchdown receptions with three. He has been the big play threat that the Lions have been dreaming of, and he despite having a game where he had one catch for 9 yards against Arizona, he is still top 20 in the league in receiving yards. It's been very impressive. Aside from that, like the offense, it's kind of hard to delve too deep into it because it was just so good. I guess we could talk about Jared Goff for a bit. Jared Goff, once again, very clean game. It wasn't
He
quite
had an incompletion this time though.
yeah, 7 incompletions. He needs to get
On
back in
the
the lab.
first snap as well, which was
Yeah.
very
Oh,
humorous. They lead us into it. This guy, no incompletions last week. First throw, airmails an open
yeah.
receiver.
But on the day, 18 for 25, 315 yards, three touchdowns, a 153.8 quarterback rating. The quarterback rating is always hilarious to me because last week he literally did not throw an incompletion, and it's not perfect because he needed to throw one more touchdown. It's a bit of a weird stat, but
Yeah.
he was very good in that area regardless. Did you have literally any gripe with Goff's game?
Not really that I remember. I rewatched defense more intently. Offense, I just kind of skimmed through the highlights because everything was good. There wasn't much to break down, so there's nothing in my mind that I remember. The thing that sticks out is how wide open everything was. Like
Yeah.
that's kind of the big story. I saw this incredibly dumb Vikings fan on Twitter chirping about Goff, and like his point was Goff wasn't that good this week because everything he threw to was wide open. I'm like, good problem to have.
Yeah.
Like if that's a negative, oh, he didn't do anything really cool because everyone was uncovered by 10 yards. It's like, well, can only play the defense you're playing, and this was a rough showing from the Cowboys. I mean, there were throws to like Khalif Raymond that are wide open. It was just brutal stuff and very little pressure against him. This was set up to be a game that Jared Goff cooks, and he did. So that's really all we need to say about that. We should give another shout out to Tim Patrick.
Tim Pat, yeah. Right on the first play of the or first completion of the game on the first Lions drive, mossing fellow or old friend Amani Oruwariye, who somehow got away with defensive pass interference on that play. But yeah, Tim Patrick has really settled into his role as the X receiver, and it's nice to be able to have a bit of a jump ball threat and a safety blanket for Goff out there.
Yeah, so you can do the conspiracy theory there that that was kind of like you see in the NBA where you get the calls where the referee lets the contact happen, sees if the basket's made. If it's not made, then he
Yeah.
blows the whistle. That is kind of my hunch on that one, that if Patrick didn't catch it, the flag would have come out late because blatant DPA. Like everyone watching that play is watching it and they're like, "Oh, that's DPA. Oh, wow, he caught it." And then the flag just never came out. But regardless, that was actually an underratedly big catch in the game because that was, I think, 3rd and 5 or 3rd and 6. You get Cowboys have a nice first drive. They stall out in the red zone, but they get points. Lions come out there. They're incompletion on first down, get run on second down. You're into a 3rd and medium. Like if you punt the ball there, then Dallas has an early edge in the game because they'll have the lead and the ball. And that's not to say that the ultimate outcome wasn't going to be what it was, because it would have been. But just the feel of the game and the tone of the game, they needed the Lions to have a good first series and to assert themselves. And they needed a big catch there. And Patrick delivered it. He had a couple other catches, got close to a touchdown, ended up getting called out short at the one, which is unfortunate for him, but doesn't matter ultimately. He's continuing to put together really nice weeks, and it's pretty remarkable that this positional group, which was something we were pretty concerned about at the start of the season, for now seems pretty nailed down.
Yeah. And I mean, it's at the point where Amon Ra, you know that he is like a very good receiver, but because of his role, you have a lot of slot guys that can fill that role if he gets injured. Tim Patrick, if he gets injured, you have Allen Robinson waiting in the wings to, fill that void. I think like between Sam Laporta and Jamison Williams, like those are the two weirdly irreplaceable pieces. Because if JMO goes down, yeah, Khalif Raymond can kind of be a speedster out there, but I don't think you could replace that role at all. So that's the one where it's like you kind of need JMO to stay healthy because at this point in the season, he has looked like the most irreplaceable part. Do you have any other notes on the offense?
This is kind of game theory, but I kind of wish we got to 50. I know they went for it on 4th and 3. I think at the 31 in the fourth quarter. I get why they did, but
Was that the Hendon
I
Hooker drive?
yes. I get why you go for it there. It's towards the end of the game. You want reps for your second team offense. But man, 50 would have been cool. At the
Yeah.
very least, Jack Fox didn't punt. That's the other token. If you don't get to 50, you got to at least have no punts, and they had no punts. So as good of a game offensively as Lions have played in a long time, and really not much bad to have on that one, and just got to keep it going against a really good defense this week, which we'll talk about later on.
Yeah, 89 points in the last two games from the offense.
I think they're
Like,
up to number one, I think, in scoring offense.
yep, averaging 30 points a game now. Despite the first 3 weeks where they looked a little out of sorts, but now that Goff has kind of settled into his rhythm, things are looking fantastic on offense, which is what you expect. Now, flipping over to the defense, because the defense had their best game of the year. This was a game against a high flying offense that, while they held Dallas to 20 points last year, the big thing was Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb lit them up. CeeDee Lamb held in check in this game, but the story of the game is the 5 turnovers. The Lions absolutely just dominated. The secondary was spectacular. Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph. I'll throw Kirby Joseph in here too because he had one interception called back and another interception later in the game. But bro, this is the Brian Branch, like true breakout into potential superstar. Like he has been absolutely spectacular this year, and in light of another event that we'll get to in a bit, he is the best defender on this team now going forward.
Hard to argue with that. He had a really good game. Actually, he had, I thought, a bad missed tackle on the CD Lamb first catch
Mm.
on that
The
first drive.
one-hander one, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that was sloppy. And then after that, it was really good. And his interception of Dak, the first one was exquisite, baiting him and then falling back. Has the second interception later. That's just kind of a freebie. It's
But
airmailed
good
over.
run back on that too.
Yes, it was. And that was one at first glance because that was a fourth down. It was like, hey, don't catch that. Bat it down. We get better field position. And then it's like, oh no, he's going to return it to the 5 yard line. So it's fine. But he was really good. And Kirby alongside him was really good. I mean, this was definitely the game where you start to get a little discourse about where does the Lions safety tandem rank in the NFL, right? Saw some discussion about that after the game. They were the meat of the defensive showing here. Them and in the first half, certainly it was a pass rush as well. Those were the two parts that were really punishing the Cowboys. And the defensive effort I thought started out so, and then it got better as the game went along. Like I thought that first drive, you do have the really bad luck catch on the second down where
Yeah.
Anzalone makes a good PBU and it bounces into a guy that's open. Um, and but then the Lamb one, he's wide open there. There was just some issues in between. You have the interception called back for Kirby, and they got the number wrong, but it was on Anzalone. He did kind of grab the tight end. The tight end sold it though. It just for the first two drives, really up until the branch interception of Dak, it was kind of like, these guys are moving the ball pretty well, and then they really just clicked. And I thought Arnold the first couple drives still pretty choppy. Then I thought after that he played his best probably 3 quarters of football. So took him a little bit to get going, maybe rest from the bye week. But after that was what we really wanted to see, a really good defensive showing against a team that has a good offense. Their defense been a tire fire this year, but they've generally been able to put up 20, 25 points against teams, and they didn't in this one.
Yeah, and I know Terry on he had the one big PBU on a 4th and 2 when the Cowboys were it was near the end of the first half. The Cowboys are in desperation mode, and 4th and 2 in their own territory. And Arnold, it was a like almost a triple move. It was kind of like a zig route to the outside that breaks back in, and he didn't bite on it at all, and he breaks on it. Maybe a little bit of contact, but I mean he's a physical corner. He made a play at the catch point and forced a big incompletion there. I thought the one catch, especially to Tolbert early in the game down the left sideline, it's like you kind of want him to just like he's there, but the plays just aren't happening. And we've seen that throughout the season so far, where he's in position and then as the ball gets there, he's either grabbing too early or he's not turning his head around. It's those kind of things where the coverage has been good. It's just finishing plays.
Yeah, it's ball skills and just kind of awareness, getting your head around workable. They
Yeah.
they just need to tweak that. The fourth down and two, he's there a little early, but after getting every single marginal call against him
Yeah.
for 4 previous games, justice. So I don't really care. I actually thought this was a really good game from Carlton Davis while we're on
Yep.
the topic. I thought he played really good coverage against Lamb, tight coverage. Lamb's catches were generally against anybody but Davis. Tom Brady kept talking about, oh, he got the hands on him. Shut up. Like there was nothing on those. Come on, man. That's a quarterback talking. But that was really good coverage from Davis, and he was active in the run game as usual. Comes down, makes an authoritative tackle, then gets kicked in the head
Yeah.
as he's laying on the ground. Sounds like he's going to play against Minnesota, which is definitely needed because I like where he's at right now, and I like the confidence he's playing with the last few weeks.
Yeah, well, I'm glad he's playing with confidence because he is about to have
Yeah,
the
yeah.
gauntlet. He's going to have his biggest challenge of the season against the Vikings. He's likely going to be following Jefferson around. I don't imagine they'll play sides as much next week. But yeah, and going back to the safeties real quick. But this is really just the Lions' red zone defense as a whole. From Detroit Lions PR on Twitter, when teams have thrown passes in the end zone against the Lions this year, they are 1 of 14, 7.1 completion percentage for 10 yards, 1 touchdown, and 5 interceptions. Kirby Joseph has 4 end zone interceptions. Brian Branch has one in this game. I think the only touchdown, it might have been the Marvin Harrison from Kyler Murray in week 3 on that first drive, because I know Cup had a touchdown, but I think he caught it before the end zone in week 1. But the Lions' red zone defense has been really good this year. They've been really good at even if they're bending a little bit, they're not breaking. They're doing a great job of holding teams to field goals when in previous years they might get touchdowns. And that safety duo just being able to roam in the end zone has been very deadly. On the whole, the defense has been good. Honestly, they've shown improvement. Ali McNeil got active in the pass rush in this game. Levon Wazirike, I thought, was doing pretty good. But I think it's time to address the elephant in the room. Aiden Hutchinson, as he's turning the corner and getting a sack on Dak Prescott, unfortunately collides with Ali McNeil's shin and breaks his leg. He is going to be out for the remainder of the season. I know some people have talked about if the Lions make the Super Bowl, he'll be able to play. We can address that if it happens, but for all intents and purposes, Aiden Hutchinson is out for the year. A brutal, brutal injury in the midst of a Defensive Player of the Year potential campaign. What does this injury mean for the Lions?
It's real tough. No real other way around it. I think outside of Goff, this was probably the worst possible injury that you could have just because it was an area on the team that we were not that high on outside of him. We had been talking in previous shows about trading for edge guys to give him some help. And that's just tough, right? Because if you go to any other position on the defense, and I think they are in decent shape, that they've built up depth, and edge is the one place they kind of have neglected depth a little bit. Part of that is also injuries that have hit. Obviously, it'd be nice if John Kaminsky were still around. It'd be nice if Marcus Davenport were still around. They've had some bad luck there, but they also haven't really spent too many draft picks at that spot. And as a result, it's just a really tough one. There's no two ways about that. You can't sugarcoat losing the best player on your defense, one of the best players in the entire league at the current moment, especially with just how dominant he's been. Even watching this tape back over the first half, he's just carved up guys week after week after week, and losing that kind of presence is really hard. But on the other hand, it's a good thing that this has happened before the trade deadline, so it gives them an opportunity to evaluate. And second of all, the strides they've made at other places on the defense, I think you could make an argument that the Lions defense this season without Hutchinson could be better than last year's defense with Hutchinson. Certainly by the end of the year where the secondary was a tire fire and they were basically having to blitz all the time to try and cover up the disaster that was everywhere else. So we saw how far they got last year with a very questionable defense. They can absolutely go certainly far in the playoffs. They're certainly still a good team. It doesn't change the fact they have a great offense, doesn't change the fact they have great safeties. It's just going to present a major challenge in the pass rushing game. And we're going to learn a decent bit about Brad Holmes. We're going to learn a decent bit about Aaron Glenn. There's a lot of interesting subplots coming out of this, but obviously just brutal.
Yeah, and there really is no way around it. The Lions' pass rush just took a massive blow. And Ali McNeil and Levi Onwuzurike, DJ Reed or Makai Wingo, they've all done a fabulous job from the interior. But now there's a serious, serious question of whether or not the Lions are going to be able to generate edge pressure at all for at least the next stretch of games here. They had a hodgepodge of edge guys playing in this game. Josh Pascal, who has looked better, but he is hardly a dangerous pass rushing threat at this point in his career. Isaac Ukwu, he was in this game. Trevor Nowaski, I believe, got a sack in this game. This is it's going to be very interesting to watch. I know some people are still James Houston believers. If there is anything left in that player, this would be a great time. I saw a few people conspiring that because Hutchinson is playing the open end, it's not allowing Houston to burn around the edge like he was in his rookie year. If that's the case, let's see it now because the Lions are going to have to get desperate for edge pressure at this point because you don't want to end up in a situation where you have to blitz every single down again, but for a different reason if you can't generate any pressure. Derek Barnes cannot get healthy soon enough. The Lions did sign Isaiah Thomas off of I believe it was the Bengals or Browns practice squad, one of those two. And, you know, I don't know, signing an Isaiah Thomas to a Detroit team has never gone wrong before. So maybe we can get some of that bad boys magic going. But yeah, this is
Yeah.
go ahead.
First off, were you watching when the injury happened, or how did you find out?
So actually, I had just gotten back from a round of golf, and I got out of the shower and I walked outside, and my girlfriend's family was all huddled around the TV, and they all turned around to be like, "I'm so sorry," because they all know I'm a huge Lions fan, and I saw the clip on Twitter. I just all I had gotten like as I got out of the shower, is I got a text from my buddy that said Hutchinson got a sack, but he's staying down in the field. Looks like he's a little banged up. And then I walk out, and the first thing I see on the TV is the image of the leg just completely snapping, which is a very gruesome visual for anyone that's a little queasy with injuries. Um, yeah, it was not a good time.
Yeah, it was funny. I was after the game, I was in the car and the talk radio was immediately having a discussion about what the worst injuries you've ever seen live are, and they had people calling in to compare. It's definitely was up there. It was one of those where watching live, I was like, what happened here? Like I couldn't see exactly, and they show some replays, and you're trying to like where the toughest thing I had watching it was there are so many legs
Yeah,
like in the picture, like there's a lot of bodies, and you're just trying to figure out like, okay, which legs are his legs? What am I looking at here? And then eventually you see the leg like wrapped around McNeil's knee like spaghetti, and you're like, oh, there it
yeah.
is. And just uh really bad. And not too many other ways to put it. I will say I thought that Josh Pascal did have a nice game. Thought he had some good bull rushes. I think ideally, and we'll get to the trade candidates a little later, but I think ideally you'd like to pair more of a speed rusher on the other side with Pascal because I do think Pascal has shown the ability to bull rush and constrict pockets. He's just not a guy that's going to sort of dip around the edge and get into the backfield. So you're going to need to find someone to pair with that. I didn't see a ton from Isaac Ukwu. I think Nowaski had a sack, but it was like I think it was an Onzarike pressure flushes him into to Nowaski. So I don't really put that one on him necessarily. There's issues here. Like if Houston can be that burn around the edge guy, so be it. But haven't seen it in a long time now. So we need to see it sometime soon, or else they're gonna have to make some other plans. Um, because they just don't have it at that position. They do have some rush from defensive tackle. McNeil had a great game, bowled over Zach Martin on one for a thunder sack. So they still have pieces. It's not the end of the world, but it is a significant blow at a position they don't have depth.
It's gonna it's going to significantly alter the way Aaron Glenn approaches games with his defensive line because, it was so easy to count on Hutchinson as the rock on that side of the ball and on that unit to kind of really be the main horse that carries the load for those guys. So it's going to be interesting. I wonder if there's a world here where the Lions are set or are fine with just having their edge guys play contain and having the interior pressure so well as they've done all year, and then just hoping the edge guys can disengage and wrap up after the quarterback breaks the pocket. But it's gonna be very interesting to see what they do over the next few weeks. I'd imagine they're going to go at least 2 or 3 games here as we get towards the trade deadline without really changing much of anything and just seeing what they have and kind of giving them a proper evaluation of what this defensive line looks like without Hutchinson. Aside from that, do you have any other defensive notes from this game?
I thought linebackers deserve a little recognition, particularly Jack Campbell, who just keeps being solid. Like he's on that trajectory where last year you reviewed the tape, you're like, oof, issue here, issue there with him. This year you're at the point where you're not really noticing him, which is
Yeah,
a good thing. Like he does pop up to make a good thing here and there, but generally it's just like, okay, he's doing the right thing. And next year, potentially, you'd like to see him take the sort of that next step to where
yeah,
he's regularly impacting plays, but he's generally in the right places, not being exploited nearly as much in coverage. Like I like the steps I've seen from him, and this is what you wanted to see for a second year player at that position. So, nice little shout out from him. Otherwise, not too much. They just dominated the Cowboys. The refs again had some marginal calls that went against them. Like that was their best source of offense, honestly, in that second half. After those first few drives, it was just really dominant stuff from the Lions. And overall, when you pair these two sides of the ball together, we talked last week, like what did we like about the team? Well, we've seen elements of a good offensive game, good defensive game. We talked about they haven't played a complete game, and
yeah,
this was the complete game. And that's just what you wanted to see coming out of a bye week.
yeah. And aside from that, special teams, Jake Bates had was actually challenged a bit in this game with a couple of longer field goals. He was perfect, and he looks to be real solid. I was watching a little bit more action around the league this week, and boy, I am not going to complain about Jake Bates being a little sketchy on extra points for a while because yeah, there's some real problems around the league with kickers. Special teams, there was one big kick return by Turpin there, but I know you had flagged that there was a missed holding call on that play. Are you concerned with the kick and punt coverage? I guess kick coverage because punt coverage wasn't used.
Maybe I saw some people talking about it. That's something they can clean up or need to deal with because they've been having a little bit of issues with their coverage. But the kick return in question here was brought out, I think, 8 yards deep, 9 yards deep in the end zone. It was at the
Back of the
end of
end
the
zone, yeah.
first half. Yeah, because the Cowboys are like, we're getting whipped. We're down a ton. There's 25 seconds left. Our only real hope to do anything here is if we get a good kick return. So that's just not super replicable because there's really no other situations where a team's going to be running one out from that deep. So that's one thing. And as for the hold, there was definitely a hold on Malcolm Rodriguez. It's not irrelevant to the play. It's very relevant to the play. It's the very hole that the guy ran right through. So not really sure what else to say there. Needs to be called. Maybe it's something to clean up. I don't know. It needs to happen more for us to really make it a discussion point. Outside of that, Bates, the 48-yarder, was nice to see him make. He also made a 48-yard extra point because of a penalty on Amon-Ra.
Yeah.
He's been real solid this year. The extra points have occasionally been a little bit shaky where he like slips it through with a bit of a draw off the kick, but not much to be mad about there. There's really not a lot of ref talk, honestly, outside of again some marginal defensive penalties, whatever. Doesn't matter in this game. This was just a really good football game and a great showing. Just got to keep it going.
Exactly. So, yeah, we'll move on from that. So around the NFL, I guess we'll start first with we can start with the Niners Seahawks game. Niners get back in the win column with a win after a late interception by Geno Smith kind of cost them at the end there. Niners are they're a weird team this year because they just haven't quite looked as dominant as they were last year. What's your read on how worried are you about the 49ers as of right now? Like scale 1 to 10.
Worried as in an opponent to be fearful of.
Yeah, like if the Lions and Niners matched up in the NFC Championship again, what would your confidence be that the Lions could beat them?
I think the Lions definitely can, but I do think the Bucks are or the Bucks, the Niners are a really good team. Um, and it would be a really competitive game, especially with the Hutchinson injury question. Like they're 3-3, so they've dropped some games, but they were very close losses by a grand total of 10 points between the three games they lost, whereas they have wins by 13, 17, and 12. I was looking at the yardage earlier this week. They're one of the best teams in yardage differential in the NFL. Like they're still really good. I think it would be probably a closer game than it was on paper last year, at least going in when we had the conception that the Lions were decently significant underdogs going into that game. I think it would be kind of more of a toss up, but we shouldn't sleep on the Niners by any stretch of the imagination because they've lost some close games.
Yeah, so it's going to be something to monitor as the season progresses here. Caleb Williams had a great showing in London to the tune of 4 touchdown passes, almost could have been five. He's had a great couple of weeks. He looks like he's living up to the hype out there.
How many weeks until Doug Peterson is out in Jacksonville?
Can't be many more. I think
Like
they play in London again. They have the double Europe game. If they lose to the Patriots, they might he might be done.
he's being left in London. They're
Yeah,
not let back on the plane.
yeah,
Yeah, the Jags, they just look really sad, and not too much else to say about that. The Bears finished their easy part of the schedule we talked about last week, and then I think they're on the bye week this week, and then we'll start to learn a lot more about them. Obviously, nice to see for their fans that Caleb Williams is in a groove, but only means so much against one of the very worst teams in the NFL.
yeah. And so I mean, again, it's the rookie quarterback conundrum. You have to just take the wins when you get them. The one thing for Caleb is he's doing a lot better of taking like the easy completion instead of forcing it downfield. I think he had like it was 18 throws of 20 or more yards outside the numbers in the first 3 weeks of the season, and he only has one such pass in the last 3 games. He's not forcing it down. He's not playing hero ball as much, which is what he was very guilty of early in the season. So that is a good sign for Bears fans. The Packers take it to the Cardinals in a game where never really like Jordan Love puts up 4 touchdowns, has an interception, a couple of throws that were maybe uh, I a little hesitant to say lucky, but he's definitely getting still a little arrogant with some of his throws.
He had that one into like triple coverage that sneaks through the defenders and is caught. It very funny to now watch like the rest of NFL Twitter catch on to this because like every week now you see some discourse about whether Jordan Love is a lucky quarterback or not. I don't really know. What I do know is that this was a stomping of the Cardinals who looked pretty terrible, honestly, watching this game. I saw chunks of it. The final 3 drives of the game end in fumbles lost by Arizona. All
Yeah.
three. Like, come on, man. They have a punt, I think, early in the game. It's a 3rd and 1 zone read that goes for -2 yards. Like, it's just brutal to watch. And their defense isn't very good. So when their offense isn't clicking, it's a rough time. And it was in this game. Interesting matchup this weekend for the Green Bay Packers. They take on the Houston Texans at home, 1 o'clock game, so we won't get to see much of it. But that's one where we would like some help from old CJ Stroud and co.
Yeah, and that has the potential to be one of the better games of the week, aside from again the Lions, who are probably the game of the week there with the undefeated Vikings. Other games around the league, this was just a funny one. The Philadelphia Eagles barely squeak by the Cleveland Browns, which prompts Nick Sirianni to taunt his own fans in Philadelphia and kind of do the hand by the ear, like the I can't hear you, which is not what you want to see from a coach in his home stadium. And then after the game, he brought his kids to the press conference to kind of act as a buffer, almost, so that the reporters would take it easy on him. And anytime there was a question that he maybe didn't want to answer fully, he would just kind of make a joke with the kids. And there was one about the fans in Philadelphia, and he literally started asking the kids like, "Oh, did you think it was loud?" Started asking everyone, and then I think a security guard from outside the room chimed in. It was like, it was loud. The vibes in Philadelphia are downright horrendous right now. Sirianni has devolved into one of the most unlikable coaches in the entire league. But the Browns lose, which is all win for everyone else because Deshaun Watson suffers. So not much there. Aside from
How
that,
how many how many more weeks are they going to let Deshaun start?
you kind of have to, right? You're kind of stuck. What can you
Yeah,
do? You have charted this path for yourselves, and you kind of have to. There's no going back because he's all his money's guaranteed. So if you pay it like you're gonna pay him to be your backup? I
I
don't
mean,
know.
I guess the argument now, and obviously with their trade, which we will discuss shortly, seems like they're now in tank mode, and honestly, I guess playing him is your fastest way to tank. So maybe that's where we're at now. The only thing I have on that game, the kick six, but a
Mm,
blocked kick six for the Browns. They run one back from I think around midfield. It was a long
yeah,
field goal attempt that they blocked. I think it was Myles Garrett that like hops right through and
yeah,
blocks it. So that was a neat play. Otherwise, this week I don't have too many game notes. I mean, Tampa Bay 51 points. They have put up 51, 30, and 33 in their last three games.
yeah. It's they've been on a roll. The Saints' fall from grace has been historic. Aside from that, I think we can start getting into the trades, but to do that, we have to talk about this game first. Monday Night Football, the Buffalo Bills and the New York Jets. It comes down to the wire, and Greg Zuerlein misses two field goals, which ends up being the difference as the Jets lose by three. But on the final drive for the Jets, Aaron Rodgers underthrows a pass to Mike Williams. He has a wide open Breece Hall in the flat. He looks him off, goes deep down the field to Mike Williams, underthrows him. It's intercepted. Jets lose. Immediately, Rodgers was very critical of Mike Williams, saying he ran the wrong route. And within 12 hours, Devontae Adams was a Jet, and Mike Williams is now on the trade block. But don't worry, guys, because Aaron Rodgers had nothing to do with it. This was definitely not a conspiracy. He also definitely did not conspire to get Nathaniel Hackett hired. He definitely did not get Alan Lazard a job. He definitely did not get Robert Saleh fired. And now he definitely did not have his old buddy from Green Bay waiting in his house for that trade announcement just so that he could have a funny clip on Pat McAfee. This is weird. The vibes in New York are not good, and yet they are doubling down on the Aaron Rodgers experiment for I guess 1 year, maybe two. What are your takes on this trade?
The Jets are never beating the unserious allegations. Like it just this is a mess. And I think they still have a path to the postseason because the AFC is really weak. That said, it's really hard to have any faith in what's going on with this team. Like their defense got mashed in game one against the Niners, but since then they've been pretty good. So if their offense gets going and maybe Devontae Adams is what they need to kind of turn a corner, then they can get into a groove. But they're 2-4 now. They play Pittsburgh this week on Sunday Night Football. That's a game. I don't know why we have to watch that game, especially after Giants Bengals this past
Well,
week.
actually, I did gloss over this, but the Pittsburgh Steelers, they dominate the Raiders, which prompts them to change their starting quarterback for reasons unknown. Justin Fields is going to the bench, and Russell Wilson will once again see NFL action for some reason.
Yeah, I don't know. The AFC wildcard picture is really an enigma to me. Like it's one of those things where some of these teams have to get in the playoffs, right? Like if we assume Ravens, Bills, Texans, and Chiefs are winning the division, then three of Jets, Steelers, Bengals, Colts, Chargers, and Broncos have to get in. And of that group, it's like, I don't know.
Ugh.
Ugh.
Like maybe Tua come back and at least give us some fun action. Like if we can get like a Miami Houston wild card, at least that'd be fun. Oh, and the AFC wild card week is going to be a brutal watch. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, so maybe Devontae Adams joining the Jets is what gets him to 9-8 and they sneak in, but kind of feels like a Pyrrhic victory even if that happens because this team does not appear to have any real championship aspirations at the moment.
No, they blew up their culture for Aaron Rodgers, which is
Yeah.
never a recipe for success. Despite how many playoff games he led the Packers to, it's not like there's a reason that they only won one Super Bowl with him. The vibes are horrendous there, and the vibes are also horrendous in Cleveland as they ship out Amari Cooper to the Bills for, I believe it was a third round pick in a pick swap.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, like a third and a seventh, and they get a sixth back. So Amari Cooper is now a Bill, which should be interesting because the Bills had kind of been lacking a top option. They have Keon Coleman, rookie, who's looked good in spurts. They have Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir kind of tag teaming slot responsibilities, but neither of them are, particularly consistent just because of their small frames. Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox are kicking around, but the Bills' offense definitely has been good regardless because of Josh Allen and James Cook, and the other running backs have been good as well. But now the Bills' offense looks like a legitimately good, uh, complete unit.
Yeah, this is a big pickup. Obviously, the Bills' receiving situation was pretty uncertain after they were forced to move on from Stephon Diggs in the offseason. They draft Keon Coleman. He's had his moment so far, but isn't really a big star yet. And in Cooper, you bring in a guy that had 1,200 yards last season. He's had a lot of 1,000-yard seasons in his career, and this year, 250 yards in 6 games, but being thrown to by a broken quarterback, certainly on papers. If he can pick up some chemistry with Josh Allen pretty quick here, then that's a real weapon for them and should solidify their inside track to winning the AFC East. And maybe it gives them a better shot to finally knock off the Chiefs later in the season in the playoffs.
Yeah. And aside from that, the Lions also extended Ali McNeil yesterday, a 4-year deal worth 97 million with 55 million guaranteed, a huge contract for McNeil. I fired off a tweet about this, just saying that it is a higher price tag than I was personally expecting, but given how much the NFL cap goes up on a year-to-year basis, it kind of makes sense to maybe a little bit of an overpay now, but the value will work out by the time that deal is has run its course.
Yeah, I was looking at the projections actually just a couple of days before. I think he was projected for 4 years, 90 million. So
Oh, okay.
comes in a little hot overall, but not a ton more. And I don't think you can be too upset about this. Like you're paying a really good player. This is a
Yeah.
guy. Was he a Pro Bowler last year, or was he just he should have been? I don't.
Uh, I think he I don't I think he fell just short of the Pro Bowl just because, it's a popularity contest. You can confirm that for me.
Let's take a
Uh,
look.
I think he had what, six
Yeah.
and a half sacks last year or something like that. So I mean he had a good year and he's looked to hopefully get going again this year after a bit of a slow start. But him and Levi beside each other, hopefully for more than just this season. And he's been great with DJ Reader beside him as well. It's a no-brainer. This is what the Lions have been saving their cap for. And I know Jeremy Reisman was talking about this on Twitter, where we should take a moment to appreciate that we're no longer talking about our incompetent coaching staff or front office or terrible ownership. We're worrying about, oh no, our blue collar talents or our blue chip talents are getting too much money. It's a good problem to have.
Yeah, and I think ultimately you want to have sort of one core guy locked in at each position. Like that should be your general idea. And McNeil is the guy you've selected defensive tackle to really pay. And I think that makes sense. He's the best player there. I think he's like roughly my age. So 4-year contract, you're buying up like the rest of his 20s more or less starting next season. So that's fine to me from a term standpoint. If he continues to play at roughly Pro Bowl level, like he's played for the last year and a half, roughly, shouldn't be a lot of issues, especially with cap going up. I think people were comparing it to the other defensive tackle contracts, and it comes in at like 75%, I think 70% of Chris Jones's contract, which seems fine, seems reasonable. Obviously, Chris Jones is a fair bit better, but getting at this proportion of that sounds right to me. So I don't have a lot of issues with this. Now you got him locked in. Take the David Montgomery extension into account. They're really in a pretty good place when you look
Yeah.
at the long-term picture. They've got some guys that still have years left on the rookie contracts, like JMO, for example, with the 5th-year option. Hutchinson, same story. Those they'll deal with in the future. It's probably like Kirby Joseph is next up in terms of true core players. Like Barnes and Onwuzurike are free agents this offseason, but they're not necessarily true core guys the way those are. They've now handled this group of the 2021 guys. McNeil's been paid, Amon Ra, Penei Sewell. That's the next group they got to get to. But this roster is pretty locked in now for the next few years, and that's what you want because it's one of the best rosters.
And one of the youngest rosters. The idea
Yep.
is you are buying these guys' best years and that their best football is still ahead of them, which is scary to think about because they are already one of the 4 or 5 best teams in the league, and now they have their entire young core locked up, so, or most of their young core at least locked up. So the Lions should be one of the top teams in the league for the next few years, assuming they draft well. We know that there are, I think we're going to head into this offseason expecting an edge to be drafted. But aside from that, I think we'll now kind of pivot back and talk about some trade options for the Lions. Now that Aiden Hutchinson is down for the year, Detroit is, again, we talked about pretty desperate for some help there. And the names there that are out there are interesting for different reasons, but I want to first start off by saying no, Max Crosby is probably still not going to be a Lion, guys. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. It's not going to happen. The Raiders, I know they just traded Devontae Adams. I don't think they're going to trade him. Even if they do, I just don't really see a world where Brad Holmes ponies up 2 first-round picks and mortgages his future to acquire that kind of player. It doesn't fit with what the Lions like to do.
It would be very un-Lions under Brad Holmes to do that kind of thing. It's a very armchair GM sort of thing. It's a very I don't know, you sort of transposing other sports onto the NFL, so to speak, in terms of the way you operate. Like, if this is a different league, I don't know, pick your other sport. I think it makes more sense where
In
you sort of
basketball,
have
this would be done tomorrow.
exactly. Things are just done a little differently in the NFL, and it's not that they can't absorb Crosby's contract necessarily. You would potentially have to subtract maybe a player like a Kirby Joseph down the road to potentially make it work. It's more about the acquisition cost of those picks. And that's where the big difference is because you look at some other leagues. You look at the NHL, for example, first round picks there. If you're a contending team, and let's say I don't know, we're the Dallas Stars, and we have the ability to acquire David Pastrnak for 2 first round picks. Be like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Because 2 first round picks for a team contending, which means they're going to be 28th, 29th in the draft order, not that valuable. They're empirically, their value isn't that high. They're not likely to be star caliber players, and they're not likely to be in the NHL contributing for 2, 3, 4 years. So if you're looking at a window, yeah, ship them out. It's fine. And it's a similar effect in baseball with prospects where it takes a while. Basketball guys take time to develop. They got to sit. And again, draft value is different. We've seen in the NFL that you can use picks in the second round, third round, late first round and get really good players who contribute right away. Last season, you have Sam Laporta and Brian Branch come in as rookies, drafted in the second round. So the kind of players you could hypothetically get with a late first round pick. And they were Pro Bowl caliber players starting on rookie contracts in year one. And the
Yeah.
opportunity cost of giving those picks up, those very valuable picks, I just don't know if they are there, especially if you're building a more sustainable model. And that's, I think, what the Lions want to do. You look at teams in the NFL that are able to stay good for long periods of time despite changing over the roster. It's because they hold on to picks and they draft well, right? The Packers, Steelers, Ravens, insert your team here. Yes, they have down years where they miss at 7-9 or whatever, but they're rarely ever 3-13. And the reason is because if you keep your picks and you draft well, you can continue to replenish the cupboards. And I think that's what the Lions want to do. And you have the confidence of knowing that you have a GM that is good enough to do that. And so overall, I think really the only players in the NFL where it's worth giving up 2 first round picks is a superstar quarterback, a best of the best kind of guy that puts you over the top. And I think a Max Crosby, while he is an exceptional player, one of the best defensive guys in the league, can you really justify it when next season you'll have a guy every bit as good at him playing the same position? Right? Like it's if he were on an expiring contract and the acquisition costs were lower, I think you can make the case. But shelling out and mortgaging the future for a great defensive end when you will have a great defensive end next season, is hard. It's a very 2024 or bust mindset to make that trade, and I'm never a fan of going all in on 1 year personally.
Yeah, I think Crosby will be a great conversation to have 2 years from now when he's on the last year of his deal and the Lions are presumably still in title contention. That's when you can say, okay, hey, let's shell out maybe a second or a third and a fifth, and let's get Crosby for the last 8 weeks of the regular season and the playoffs because he is, again, pretty much another Aiden Hutchinson. Their skill sets are very similar. Their body types are very similar. They're both very tall. They both have a little bit short arms that everyone likes to criticize, and they're both very good at their jobs. But it's just not going to happen this year. Now, as for some people or some players that might happen this year, let's first start with the most popular of these names, Hassan Reddick, who has been holding out from Jets camp, and he was rumored to have a contract on the table, but he wasn't a fan of it, so his agency dropped him as a client. He is now on his own and still holding out. He's 30 years old, rumored to be getting a new deal, upwards of 25 million per season. This is one where if he was on a 1 year deal or if you could convince him to sign a 1 year deal, then maybe. But he wants to cash in because he has had a good track record over the last few years of production, and now he wants to cash in now that he's 30 and his career is starting to wind down a little bit. I don't know. Like, would you even consider this one given the question marks with culture?
Well, we got some news today that the Lions have apparently inquired, according to I think Jeremy Fowler of ESPN. Good.
I mean, yeah,
You
good for
should,
inquiring.
yeah, you should call about anybody, see what the market is. To me, an extension at 20 plus million doesn't make much sense for the Lions for the same reason I just pointed out. You will have Aiden Hutchinson, who will be a 20 plus, if not 30 plus million defensive end in the future. He's got a couple years with the rookie option, but that's something you got to plan for long term. So I don't really think giving the contract makes sense to Reddick. As you mentioned, if you could convince him to play, because he's not unsigned, he is under contract. He's
Hmm.
just choosing not to play. So if you could trade for him and convince him to play for the rest of the season and the acquisition cost isn't that high, sure, take a look at it. But don't know how likely those odds are. And second of all, this is an interesting idea. With Hassan Reddick, he's not really a culture fit, so to speak. Seems like a little bit of a head case. Maybe the Lions culture is good enough that you can absorb that and get the best out of him. But it's a little bit of an uphill climb to think everything sort of falls in place to the extent needed to make this one work.
Yeah, and for that reason, it probably won't happen because the Lions value culture above everything. So, moving on to someone that is a culture fit and has familiarity with both Dan Campbell and Aaron Glenn, Trey Hendrickson of the Cincinnati Bengals. He's a stylistic fit, he has familiarity, and he's on a team that has had a bad start to the year. The Cincinnati Bengals just won their second game on Sunday in a interesting game against the Giants, and they now,
Interesting is generous.
yeah, they now sit 2-4 on the season, and there is a case to be made that if the Bengals kind of fall off a cliff a little bit in the next few weeks, they might be willing to sell off a piece like Trey Hendrickson to recoup some assets in a tank year. What are your thoughts on that one?
I like Hendrickson. I think he's a good player. I think it's an interesting fit with the familiarity from New Orleans. As you mentioned, the contract is reasonable. He's at 14.8 million this season, 15.8 next year. It's a potential move for this year and next. Problem being that he did ask for an extension and I believe requested a trade earlier this year with an extension as part of that. That's where it kind of becomes problematic. I also don't know what the acquisition price is. I don't know necessarily um, how willing the Bengals are to make this move because to some degree you're kind of waving a white flag on the year, and I don't think they want to do that. It depends, as you mentioned, on how the next few weeks goes. If it's not worth a first round pick, then I would, and you don't have to give him a fat extension, then I would definitely have some interest because he's a really good player and would raise your ceiling on this year considerably, and you'd have the ability to have one of the best defensive end combos in the league next year for a not outrageous price. But again, I don't know what the acquisition cost is, and I don't know how firm he is on getting that extension.
Yeah, and similarly, in terms of the problem with acquisition cost and potentially an extension, though this player is signed for this year and next at 17.25 million. Harold Landry, who is on a Titans team that certainly is raising the white flag because Will Levis is not going to lead them anywhere except for the dumpster. He has familiarity with Lions defensive line coach Terrell Williams, who was Landry's defensive line coach in Tennessee for a long time. He's 28 years old, recovering from a 2022 ACL injury, but has, again, a history of production, which we know the Lions value. This is one where, again, depending on acquisition cost, it could make sense given the fact that he's under contract for next season as well.
Yeah, this one feels doable. It's kind of a funny full circle moment. I don't remember if you recall when a lot of people in the Lions fan base wanted to draft Harold Landry back in the
Mm-hmm.
day. I believe that was the Ragnow draft. He ended up sliding into the second round of that year, but it is just humorous to see his name come back around. I I don't know his game that well because I don't watch the Titans very much, certainly not since they were good when they had Ryan Tannehill. The PFF pass rush grades are kind of underwhelming, but he does have 12 sacks and 10 and a half in his past. What is your read on his pure pass rush ability?
I think he works better as a complement to Aiden Hutchinson than
Yep.
a replacement. I think because although I don't know, it's kind of weird because Hutchinson being on the open end kind of messes with this because Landry is more of a speed rusher. He does a lot better with beating guys to the outside. And if you have two of those guys, it can be a problem. So maybe it would work better as a replacement, but it's a little bit of a weird one. I think this is one where if the Lions were to acquire him, it would maybe take a few games for him to get up to speed, but he would be a good pass rushing threat. I don't know how good of a run defender he is, though, which might limit what you're willing to give up if he's not quite as good against the run as he is against the pass. Although, I should state, I haven't, like, don't take my word on it. He might be a great run defender. I just am a little unfamiliar with his game.
Yeah, it just depends on like all these guys, the acquisition cost. If you're not giving up anything premium, then I think it could make some sense. He's got the cap hit and the way his contract is structured is okay for the Lions because you still have a number of guys on rookie deals for the part of his contract that's signed, right? Like you have Branch on the rookie deal for a few more years, you have Hutchinson on the rookie deal for a few more years, you have Laporta on a rookie deal for the few more years. So I think anyone that kind of fits in that next couple of years window is doable in terms of absorbing a higher cap hit. And I do like the idea of a guy that's signed for a few more years. It just comes down to price, like all these guys. And if there's a deal that makes sense, he's certainly a logical option because he's only 28, like fits in buying not just this year but the future. I wouldn't be opposed.
Yeah. Now, because acquisition cost has been such a roadblock in projecting trades, here are some of the cheaper options, if you will. Jadeveon Clowney on the 1-5 Panthers, currently injured, would have to clear physical before that happens, but he used to be a very good pass rusher, so could be acquired. Jamin Davis from the Commanders, if you want some reinforcement at the Sam role. He transitioned from Mike linebacker to more of a pass rush role this year. Josh Uche, Michigan legend. He's 2 years removed from a 12 sack season. And again, he's an upgrade on James Houston, essentially, where you kind of hope to get some of that juice from rookie year James Houston in that kind of role. The most popular one that I've seen is Aziz Ojulari, who's kind of been buried on the Giants depth chart behind Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns. He could be someone who again fits into more of that speed rusher role, but would be a good pass rusher and could complement Derek Barnes in that way when he comes back. Do any of those options appeal to you?
Did you skip Zadarius Smith?
Oh
Or are
yeah,
you
I
just
did.
avoiding him?
Zadarius Smith, yeah, would be a little bit more expensive to acquire, but not as expensive as the other guys we talked about earlier. He's another one who a little bit older, kind of like Clowney, but he was very dominant for a couple of years there with the Packers and Vikings. Um, stylistically, he would probably, I guess, probably play the Hutchinson role. No,
Probably, yeah.
that's one where I think in terms of stylistic fit, that might make the most sense for Holmes in terms of value compared to like acquisition cost there. I don't know. Like of those names that I just threw out, which would be the most intriguing to you?
I like Zadarius Smith. He is older. Maybe he's lost a step. I know his grading is a little lower compared to last year, where he was still really good on an excellent Browns defense. I don't know how much of that is age, how much of it is the crumbling Browns defense and whatever is going on with that franchise. I just like the sort of experience. He's a veteran. He's been around. He's played a lot in the NFC North, including for
Yeah, I
two
was
of
gonna
our
say he could do the tour here.
yeah, two of our rivals previously. I like him. Josh Uche, I am really intrigued by because he's on a really low cap hit. He signed a prove it deal with the Patriots in the offseason that surprised a lot of people. I haven't seen him much recently, but I know he had success in New England previously. And going back to his days at Michigan, he was one of the best pure pass rushers Michigan has had in the last 15 years or so. Just a demon around the edge. And he's a little more versatile. Like you can drop him into coverage and do things with. I actually kind of like, and I don't know what your thoughts on this is, but depending on acquisition cost, this is more of the bargain bin area where you're talking more in that like fifth, sixth round pick range for some of these guys. What do you think about the prospect of acquiring two different guys that are both in this sort of flyer range?
If that's the case, then give me Uche and Zedarius because Uche, I think, for the cost will be the most worth it, and Zedarius for the cost will be the best one for one like replacement for Hutch in terms of filling that role as both a run defender and a pass rusher. Because
Yeah,
if you could get Uche and Zedarius for the combined cost of like I don't know, say like a fourth, fifth, sixth. Like if you just take the middle of your draft class and ship that out, would that be something that interests you?
Yeah, and the reason for this is I'm very hesitant to give up first round picks, very hesitant to give up second round picks, very hesitant to give up third round picks. Fourth rounders, you can, that's more doable. Because we look at Brad Holmes's draft, and Holmes is a great drafter. The success has tapered off pretty significantly outside the fourth round, which isn't unusual. That's
Yeah.
the NFL, right? But fourth round, and that's where we found Amon Ra, right? Third round, that's where we get Lee McNeil. Like those picks are very valuable. Fifth, sixth, seventh, less valuable. And my other thing is, I was looking at their draft class. They got in this upcoming year, they got two fourths, a fifth, a sixth, and two sevenths. And we're talking about this. Do you need those picks?
Not the sevenths.
Not really.
But
Like, so
like
that's
if
my
you have
thing. You're
yeah,
you're starting when you start a rebuild like the Lions did under Holmes in 2021, 2022. Okay, makes sense. Let's take 9 picks. Let's take 10 picks in a draft because
because
we're a
they'll all
bad
make the
team,
team.
right? We're a bad team. We got tons of roster spots. We can afford to develop guys. When you're a contending team, you don't have that many roster spots. This isn't baseball. You don't have 6 levels of minor leagues to stash guys in. Like, you don't need to take 11 picks in a draft when you're a contending team, especially not in the fifth, sixth, seventh round range. And so when you've got a little pile up there and some picks to work with, clear some of that out and actually get some players to help this year's team and potentially future years teams. I like that idea. I'm not opposed to that by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, and I know though if you swing two moves, I know that would keep the fan base like all the vultures that have been clamoring for a big move. It would keep them happy because like you fill it by committee, and I think those if you do those two moves, like whether it's Ojulari or Uche whatever, and you pair that with Zedarius, probably makes the most sense in the Hutchinson role. All of a sudden the defensive line looks really really good again
Yeah.
because you
And I
have
like the
all
idea of adding those two just because we're talking about players that are decently marginal, right? Outside of the Hendrickson, Crosby tier of guys, we're talking about guys that are just contributors, rotational pieces. And so I know this is kind of the money ball replace Hutchinson by
In the
aggregate kind
aggregate,
of
yeah.
thing. Yeah. But you think about it. Can Josh Uche give you 65 snaps of really good pass rush per game? Like, probably not.
No.
Can Azeez Ojulari give you 65 snaps? Can Zadarius Smith at his age give you 65 snaps? No, but can 20 snaps of Uche and 20 snaps of, whoever mixed in with Pascal, mixed in with even a Ukwu or whoever, can that give you something? Potentially, because those guys, you rotate them in, they're going to have more in their legs on the 20-25 snaps they play. They're not going to get worn down. They're going to be fresh. They can show the other team different things that challenges the tackles. I think that's a far more attractive or doable strategy than just believing like, oh, if we put some guy out there for 50 snaps, he's going to be able to get it done, because he probably won't, because he's just not in that tier of player.
Yeah, so it's going to be very interesting to monitor over the next few weeks to see whether or not Holmes makes a move. Now we are running short on time, but quickly we'll just dive into a very, very brief Vikings preview here. The Lions going up against the undefeated Vikings in the first real major clash in the NFC North. I know the Packers lost to the Vikings earlier this year, but this is like we are very quickly getting into territory where this might be the two games against the Vikings might determine the number one seed in the entire NFC. Lions Vikings, what is the biggest key to a Lions victory in this game?
I mean, this is strength on strength. Lions offense coming in red hot. Vikings defense has dominated this year. If you look at the EPA graphs, if you look at some of the other fancy stats, they've been unbelievably good this season. Feels I actually like the matchup. Like, it feels a little flimsy to me. Not to say the Vikings don't have a good defense, but like when you've been throttling teams to a ridiculous extent, you're probably going to have a down game at some point. Like, this is the NFL. Like, there are good weeks, then there are bad weeks. The only thing that is making me hesitate a little bit is the fact they're coming off a bye, which I don't love, but it just feels like they're due for a bit of a down week. And I was looking at some stats earlier. The Vikings are still towards the top of the league in blitz rate. Colton tweeted this earlier today. They're third in blitz rate this season. Jared Goff has been one of the best quarterbacks against the blitz this year. So that's a matchup. We kind of saw that last year where they were blitzing Goff a lot. He just stood in there, picked them apart in both those matchups. So I like that side of the ball. I think the Lions can certainly go toe to toe with this team. And then you flip over to the other side. Vikings offense hasn't been nearly as good as their defense, and the Lions defense is going to be learning life without Hutchinson. So it's going to be an interesting matchup in that way. I kind of like the Lions odds here. I think they might be motivated to sort of win one for Hutch, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating game, and it's going to tell us a lot about the strength of the NFC North, which we didn't mention, but it is the historically good NFC North through 6 weeks, the highest win percentage of any division through this amount of games in the NFL season. So it's going to be an exciting game on Sunday in that 1 o'clock window. And hopefully things go well for the Lions, but we'll be here next week to recap with you guys. So we'll see you all next week. Thank you all for listening or watching. If you're on YouTube, be sure to follow the show. Follow us on Twitter, and we'll see you guys soon. In the meantime, let's go Lions. Cheers, guys.